I've seen the charts, pumped them all, had my Lambo dream. Bitcoin castles, now a shattered meme. Hot wallet nights, DeFi craze. When you and I chase those golden days, the memcoin pumps, telegram fights, the way you'd ape with me through the nights. Will you still love me when I'm no longer a crypto millionaire? When my bags are dust and I'm broke beyond compare, I know you won't, I know you won't, my dear. When the market's red, you'll disappear. I've shilled the coins, built them up with my tweets now, chasing moonshots, ignoring all the doubt now. Hot staking days, blockchain dreams, the way you'd hold with me it seems. And all the games, we got to know your diamond hands and crypto glow. Will you still love me when I'm no longer a crypto millionaire? When my bags are dust and I'm broke beyond compare, I know you won't, I know you won't, my dear. When the market's red, you'll disappear. Dear Satoshi, when I lose it all, please let me keep my dash. When the bear comes, tell me it won't crash. Vitalik, tell me if you can. All that code, all that chain, all that speed makes me feel no pain. It's my hedge, it makes me feel like diamonds. Will you still love me when I'm no longer a crypto millionaire? When my bags are dust and I'm broke beyond compare, I know you won't, I know you won't, my dear. When the market's red, you'll disappear. Will you still love me when I'm no longer a crypto millionaire? Will you still love me when I'm not rich beyond compare?
So, hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome, Brandon. How's it going?
It's going well. How you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, we were just, sorry to cut you off on our, pre-show chat thing. But we were just talking about how the industry's shifting around here, right? With it's kind of feels like the people's bear market, but everything else is booming, and it's kind of a little bit of the to some people, at least the KOL apocalypse a little bit. I know there's a lot of people like marketers and other people who are, looking for work around now. And it's kind of interesting where it's like all-time high in a lot of things. But in that case, it kind of feels a little bearish.
Yeah, there's still a lot of noise in this space. I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's kind of made a name in Web3, but yeah, definitely in a bear market. So it's kind of interesting to see some of those things still going strong. But it's also I think a little uplifting because there's a lot of people that are still optimistic, and I think there's a lot of positivity going around, even though we're in a down part of the cycle. So maybe it doesn't last as long as it usually does. Maybe we actually come out of this a bit sooner. Maybe some good things happen. There's still a lot of positive things happening on the regulatory front and with adoption. And I don't think there's too much to be sad about. It's just markets are in the dumps. So
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things where a lot of industries don't have this cyclical nature, right? You have, like, for example, everyone has to eat, everyone has to put fuel in their vehicles, or there's all kinds of things that just, tax season, of course, that's always a thing. There's the perpetual season. And you do have like economic downturns, which affect things like people going out to eat or something like that. But this whole 4-year cycle type thing, it's very sort of speculative. And I kind of feel like one of those reasons why we didn't have a proper alt season, as it were, is just because we're pivoting to like the real world, to a revenue model for chains, and it's kind of like this taken for granted thing where, oh, there will be money that will just come into our space and we'll get some. Just that's like over. It's kind of like you need to earn it now.
I guess we'll find out. It's speculative, but there's a little bit to substantiate it, right? The 4-year cycle largely comes from the idea that, you know, Bitcoin is going to have every 4 years, and it's going to become more scarce and more valuable, and thus it's going to generate a lot more value. So if you put your money in at this period of time and you get involved, and then it's going to pour over into everything else in the market, and that's how we get our alt seasons and our big spikes and our FOMOs and pump this, pump that, go to the moon. We've had 3 or 4, I'd say 3, more or less like solid cycles that we can really lay our hats on. If we go back to, you know, the inception of Ethereum and the rest of this alt market that's kind of evolved from there, and the different chains. But it's definitely changing with institutions finally getting involved and pouring in a different set of capital. It's kind of restructuring, I think, where the value is being driven in this market. So maybe we don't see those 4-year cycles as prominently as we do before, but I don't think they're going to just disappear altogether. I just think it's going to act much differently. Maybe they're shorter, maybe they're longer, maybe you don't notice them too much because there's more stable retail involvement, or not retail, but institutional involvement and capital. But we'll see how things kind of shape up.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I think a lot of the space has just been unprepared for how things have shifted, where you have a lot of like outlandish price predictions for things like Bitcoin, for example, that just didn't get anywhere near that, and then also anticipating massive crashes beyond what we have as well. And I kind of wonder if the Wild West days might be over, where it's just not going to be God candles every other weekend and then just absolute crazy crashes and people getting wrecked and blood in the streets the next weekend. It just might be a little bit more normal, which from my perspective, I've wanted that. I've always wanted some stability. I just care, in it for the tech, that kind of thing of you take the money that comes as it goes, but for the most part, just focus on whatever. And but for a lot of people that came into the space, I think they kind of got into the space because of the ability to go up and down with these things. And when it doesn't do that anymore, then maybe they're not as interested. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's this toxic narrative in the space that's existed for a long time where we all expect to put a bunch of money into something and it's going to go to the moon and then it's going to stay there and we're all going to be rich and drive Lambos. And I don't know exactly where that came from, but it kind of permeated throughout this space over time. And that's just kind of like the retail expectation, which is terrible because, I mean, don't we want to put our money in something and see that value go up little by little over time and sustain that value too, not just flow in and flow out? And it's one thing I hate about these 4-year cycles is I think it kills the ability for the space to grow naturally. But I also think the tech in this space is very, very far along compared to what people can keep up with and understand. And so it's hard to grow a lot of value on a chain like Ethereum or Solana or wherever, we're driving these DApp markets and creating applications and use cases, because ordinary people still can't understand it, and it's still complicated and it's still scammy and it still doesn't work, and it's still, you got to connect this wallet and bridge there and move to that exchange and have this token, and you got to pay for this gas fee, and you got to have this underlying base chain token at the same time. And it's like people don't have time to figure that out, and a lot of that complexity gets undercut when you bring in institutions because they figure it out and they simplify things too. And I think we're just now starting to see that, where most people, maybe not you, maybe not me, will probably want to go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and buy crypto and do something simple. Whereas the other half of the Web3 population is going to want to stay decentralized. And I think that's another thing that we have to balance, and something that slows down the regulatory process quite a bit. I think we're slowly coming out of the Wild West of things, but I don't think crypto will ever not be a little Wild West just because of how much it innovates. There's always something new. we're trying to substantiate like DeFi swaps right now. That's something that's existed for a long time. We're just trying to substantiate tokens and tokenization, something that's not new. But there's a lot of stuff that's new that is happening in the space. So how do we account for that? So I think there'll be a little bit of both. And again, the market will sort that out with time.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's funny you're talking about the DeFi swap stuff. It's just a little bit of a foreboding maybe. Let me hit this quick, like 10, 15-second intro thing, and then we'll officially get started. All right, Andy,
Let's do it.
All right, so officially then, welcome. Hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to the Digital Cash Rundown. This is episode 220. It means I've been doing it for over 220 weeks in a row since the uncertain times. I'm joined by the one and only Brandon Zemp. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Pleasure to be on 220. That's a good round number.
Yeah, it's a good round number. I wonder if there's going to be a competition for like 222 or I don't know what's the next big number that people like to be on. But yeah, it's been since 2020, so quite a long time. So yeah, it's I was on your show a few months ago, I think, maybe 6 months, something like that.
Yeah, last year.
And I just figured, every once in a while I do like to have a guest who has a good mic. So it's definitely a good candidate for that.
Yeah, it's always helpful when both people have a good mic. Then everything sounds much more clean and crisp. And congrats on being consistent in this space too. It's hard to do a show, a podcast, anything in this kind of format consistently for that long. So props to you for that. It's difficult.
Yeah, thanks. And especially because I think if you're doing well at it, it's easy to keep doing at it. And I've kind of been on like the low end back burner for the 5-6 years, kind of the same level, but it definitely, it's more of like a grounding mechanism where it just gives me something to do at a consistent time, at a consistent day. And everything else is crazy, like 10:30 at night, writing up some stuff, messaging people on Telegram, and then all that kind of chaos. It's just like, well, I got my structure now, so there's something I have to put pants on for. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and it's fun too. I genuinely enjoy it. It's better than sitting down at a desk and having a typical white collar job, I guess, or having to do any kind of blue collar work like that. It's very unique in that aspect, and I enjoy having those conversations with people and learning about the space, and because I feel like I'm educating myself at the same time, then getting to share with other people, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way. And it's a good way to keep up on everything that's going on and to really dive deeper into different issues and things that crop up and new innovations and cool stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good anchoring mechanism. And so kind of keep on that note, we're going to talk about the Aave thing, which kind of it's one of those things you were talking about, the whole, the average person, the masses aren't interested in swapping 1 million tokens for this and balancing the gas fees and all this other complexity. And what on its surface, at least, it looks like one of those cases, like the worst case of that. I'm just showing this post from Stanny.eth. Earlier today, a user attempted to buy Aave using 50 million of USDT through the Aave interface, and given the unusual size of the order, blah, 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 they warned them, but then they clicked the checkbox and did it anyway. So they basically got almost like 49 point something million lost in the swap, where all they got out of it was, just a few $1,000. And it seems like a nightmarish type of an issue situation, right? At first glance, what was your first kind of reaction when you saw this?
Yeah, I felt bad for the individual. That's the kind of thing that people will end up putting a gun to their head for. Like, it's terrible. Like $50 million, just a few thousand, just at the click of a button, making a mistake. And in a space where things are decentralized, it's nearly impossible, if not really hard, to get any of it back. And so it sucks to see that. But it goes back to a point I made earlier about the space being difficult. Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, at this point, I think in 2026, we should have better safeguards in this space to protect against that stuff. Like, if someone's making a swap, and there's a potential to go from $50 million in value to a few $1,000s in value, there should be like some circuit breaker that goes off and says, hey, I'm pretty sure this person doesn't mean to do this. Like, how do we like mitigate it? How do we put extra warnings up? How do we prevent slippage like that from taking place? Because it happens to people that understand the space very well. I've made those mistakes. They really hurt. There's people that don't understand the space at all and that are scared to get into it for very specific things like this. And then you see it in the news and it just further validates, why would I swap something on X, Y, and Z? Or why would I be a part of this space if I could lose all my money with something so silly? I think people need to take it more seriously in the space, and we need to have better solutions, because it's just ridiculous that it happens. And whether it's by stupidity or error or not having enough knowledge, that none of that should matter. This shouldn't happen by clicking a button on accident.
Yeah, and I just saw like one of the quotes that it's like, as much as I love DeFi, this is a horrible stain on the crypto industry. Losing 99% of 50 million because you wanted to swap to another coin is insanity. Yeah, that is like 100% true. And another good point, Tavano, I don't know, Tay is always a fun person to follow because she's very, very colorful in some of these like swaps and exploits, but also very talented at like tracing stolen transactions. But anyway, she said, remember kids, warnings with checkboxes are for lawyers, not for users, which, you know, is a good point. The thing that's kind of crazy to me is I don't know exactly with crypto. You don't know what really happened, right? You know, just the technical details of someone did this and this is the result. I cannot believe right now, I disbelieve this was a simple mistake of some kind. Just because who has 50 million at least on their phone, first of all, and like just clicks a random button, overrides warnings, and just goes YOLO on the swap. Like, who does that? It could just be, the thing about the crypto space is, if this was any other space, it would have probably been something definitely nefarious or intentional or something. With crypto, it's also probably that, but there's also the realistic chance it's just some mad lad, some degen who just doesn't know, doesn't even care, and just it could actually be what it seems like on paper. But I almost feel like it's some sort of a laundering type thing, or some kind of a thing where they collected the fee on the other end and just took this as a fee of like pretending like they lost their money.
Yeah, there's a lot of context to it that's kind of left out, so it's hard to speculate fully. Like, is this some guy sitting at a hedge fund that had $50 million and he wanted to swap it on behalf of the hedge fund for a certain coin? Is this some guy sitting in his basement that made a lot of money in crypto that was trying to swap it? Is this someone that is trying to take a huge $50 million tax deduction right in the middle of tax season because they don't want to give it to the IRS and they're that stubborn? Is this someone, laundering money? Are they doing something nefarious and bad? Like, there's a lot of reasons for maybe why this could have happened. Maybe it could have been intentional. It is entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that it was a mistake, because I've seen it happen in the space a lot too, and for very big amounts. I have no idea, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities, and I guess we'll never know. Did they ever say who it was, or?
Well, here's where I think it's as a rapidly developing situation, as they call it, right? I think there's I saw speculation. I wish I could throw it up on the screen, but I can't remember where it was. But I saw someone say that they thought it was traced back to a person in particular who operated some centralized exchange years ago that was like shut down because it was sketchy. And they also sold about $1.4 billion worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum a few months ago. And then that's where these stable coins came out of Binance, where that was the origin. Of some KYC Binance account withdrew all this, and then is now, that's where it went, or part of it went at least. Again, a fraction of all this other money. So there's speculation that it would be someone running this now defunct exchange that decided to clearly get rid of it in a way. And I don't know how sure that is. It seems like an aggressive amount of incompetence other than that, like a ridiculous amount of incompetence for people to just make that big of a mistake on a mobile phone, withdrawing 50 million from Binance to, and this on your phone doing it. Seems a little strange. So I don't know. It could.
People do strange things.
Yes.
And we can't rule that out either. But I don't know. I think just because it's in the middle of tax season, it would be a very clever way to go about doing that, and then to have deniability that you did it on purpose. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. I'm just kind of spitballing and speculating, but who knows? We've seen crazy things in this space.
Yeah, definitely. I would say tax loss harvesting could be one thing where you just need to create a loss to get yourself under a threshold, where you just crunch the numbers of like, okay, look, I'm going to pay 100 million in taxes unless I throw away 50 million. And then therefore, this is 50 million better. It could be something like that if you're at that scale. It's got to be that or laundering, I think. But kind of as your greater point was, the weird thing is that we don't know that it was a mistake. That you can fat finger crazy things like that. I have known people to have made, lost large amounts of money with a wrong click. And I've also known other people to have like millions in their MetaMask and be wiped out by some phishing scam or something like that. And like to me, my brain cannot fathom having like millions in a MetaMask. Like I cannot imagine. I wouldn't sleep at night. I'd be like worried about my OPSEC way too much. It just to me would be crazy. And even then, even like hardware wallets and stuff, I'm always just like wondering about like, is it set up right, etc. But then, yeah, there are some people who did crazy things to get, or they were early Bitcoin investors, and then they got a bunch of money off of that. And then they reinvested in other things in crypto that then went astronomical. And then from there, they didn't really build an empire brick by brick to billions. They just ended up with billions on their phone. And it is a real possibility there is someone like that did this.
Yeah. I think there is more still that can be done by the space to at least narrow down what those possibilities are without giving away like the basic information, identity, and things like that people love about using DeFi and having that privacy and autonomy. Again, like you shouldn't be able to just push a button and it swaps $50 million to a few thousand. There should be some kind of way to mitigate it, or at least create like these buffering barriers where you have to click multiple times or do some kind of authentication, or it shows you like very clearly, you're going to swap $50 million like for a few thousand. Like, do you accept to do that? Like warning, and then if they're clicking boxes and checking off, yes, I want to do it, it kind of eliminates the, oh, oops, this was a mistake. This was more intentional. I still think there can be more done at a protocol layer and an application layer for some of this stuff that would at least kind of help figure out, like, was this intentional? Was this like a mistake? I also think people would fat finger things a little less if that was also the case. It's too easy to push the wrong button. It's also too easy to push the wrong button on purpose and say it was an accident. So it's hard to tell like where the truth kind of falls on some of the stuff.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, those built-in sort of safeguards are like, the thing about with crypto is, first of all, it is supposed to be permissionless, right? It's supposed to be anyone can do anything. You can't stop them. And also, we are at very much like the infrastructure protocol level still. Most user apps are just not what I would consider user focused. Like the fact that you have a block explorer, which I think is great. It's great proof that this is something real, but no one will ever look at a block explorer in the next 5 years. Like they won't even know what it is really, because that's very technical. And when you're doing any kind of like a desktop client or, anything like that, and you're seeing an address, like a raw crypto address, and you're pasting in an address is just wild work for an end user product, because it's not. And so if you just hit go, you hit go, that's what you're doing. Like I have to say, post this thing. A friend of mine, PaperX, who runs ThorSwap, which is a DeFi front end. He just says, like, yes, code is law, but if you're building a product, you should protect users. We already have extensive slippage warning with checkboxes in place and force streaming, etc., whenever possible. But extreme edge cases can happen. Already discussing implementing with the team to basically, and he says, we've already implemented something similar for ThorChain liquidity provision. Unfortunately, if you have a negative position, we've blocked withdrawal, as it means users would have their positions wiped out, locking in losses with no chance of recovery. So there are some entities that are thinking of how to just find things that are objectively like bad and making sure the user can't do it through like consumer-facing interfaces.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other side of this too is, if you want an ordinary customer, and you want a bank or an institution or someone a lot larger to work with the Web3 space, like a lot of the stuff needs to have like some kind of safeguards. It needs to have some kind of rule setting, or at least ways again to mitigate, because you can't onboard and have mass adoption. It's almost like a little weird for people to want both at the same time, but you can't have mass adoption and millions of people come onto a platform, and let's say they all want to use Aave and a DeFi swap, if that is like a very real possibility, because people are going to make mistakes and they're not going to know what they're doing, and they're going to be throwing their money around, but they're not going to expect to lose huge sums of money. Like, there's too many risks there, and I think it's ultimately holding itself back in a lot of ways. I can understand too the other side of it, like wanting to have control over your money and wanting to have sovereignty and not having all these overbearing rules and institutions. Like, I get the degen, decentralized, old ethos, I think, of crypto, like vibe. That's something that was really attractive to me early on. We have to find a way to kind of exist in both worlds, or DeFi is never going to make it into the mainstream. Like, you can't have that risk be so prominent as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something we're going to start to see the world sort of TradFi and DeFi sort of reverse in terms of risk profile, where one of the whole reasons, I mean, in the Bitcoin Genesis block, there was a message about Chancellor on the verge of the second bailout for the banks, whereas clearly this technology was meant as an alternative or a protest to mismanagement, to risk in the TradFi system, where people wanted to just safely invest money and just have it taken care of, and then their banks kept going belly up doing crazy stuff, and then they had no accountability. And so it's like, well, you failed, let's take control over our own money. And right now at this early, maybe not right now at this early stage, but during the first, 17 years of crypto, we've had, for the most part, it's been too new, too wild, where it's been a lot riskier than the traditional system. There's been upside, but it's been risk. And the risk of you losing or getting hacked or making a screw up like that has outweighed the risks of the other system. But I do think we're coming up on a time soon, again, it better be the next few years, like the next 5 years, where the risk of the TradFi system will start to be bigger, where at least when you control your own money, when you click a swap, it's going to do the thing that it says. The yield and how it works is transparent, and there's enough safeguards so people don't make these crazy mistakes, where then now the other system is, the banks could just YOLO your money and just blow the whole thing up and inflate away your currency at a whim, depending on what war they want to finance or whatever. And then that world becomes riskier. And I think as soon as the risk profile and knowledge of it tips, that's when we have mass adoption.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at like Satoshi's original vision for Bitcoin and the fact that Bitcoin was a baby of the 2008, 2009 recession, essentially in the US, and kind of the things that were happening financially in the markets, then it makes sense why that became the ethos of this industry. it's just hypocritical, I think, for the industry itself to say we want that independence and sovereignty and control and privacy and protections for ourselves and to be outside of TradFi, but to also say, oh, but we want to suck on the teat of institutions and go mainstream at the same time. Like you can't do both without, risking the biscuit in some kind of way. And maybe these institutions will make the mistake too. Like maybe B of A will have their own coin and inflate it away and, create some kind of like new banking crisis. It's like a hybrid between TradFi and Web3. I very well could see that end up happening. But I don't know. It's gotten to the point where people have wanted that for a long time. Now we have it. Now institutions are involved. We have investment products, that we have a stock market that's going to go 24/7, and everything you think of that's an object, physical or digital, is going to be tokenized, and everything's going on chains. Like there's so many avenues where this can go wrong. But we're all kind of looking at the positives and being hopeful right now. But I don't know. It's hard to exist in the common current world without going the TradFi route, or at least adopting TradFi into this space. And it's just the reality. Like everyone wants to be degen and dystopian and have their own control and be outside the system. And I think that's kind of like the wet dream of cypherpunks, and it's kind of permeated in the space over time. But it's a hard reality to create because we don't live in that kind of a world. We live in a very integrated world, a very highly intricate world. And there's so many different moving parts, and economies are highly dependent on all these other moving parts. And so Web3, unfortunately, can't exist outside of it. It has to fit into it in some kind of way. And that's what we're kind of going through right now. And some of these new baby steps in the industry and new growth milestones is, we have to find ways to integrate together. And we want Web3 to exist and have its own separate world, but largely it's going to get integrated with the existing systems we have today. So I think people just need to kind of shift their mindset for the reality of what this space is going to look like going forward. And that Web3 will always have that fun, decentralized, independent element, but it's never going to be like it was in early days. Because in early days, no one wanted to touch it. It was looked at as rat poison. It was looked at as a market of scammers and fraudsters and laundering. Like it was looked at like a dark web, kind of, essentially. It's far from that today. It's very, very different. So I think there's still people that have some nostalgia, and I experienced this a little bit when I was at ETH Denver. Like there's people that were kind of like, oh, the good old days when crypto was like this and that, and we were talking about privacy, and we were talking about doing these different things with our transactions and protecting our money and fighting it back against big government and society. And like, but we don't live in that world anymore. Like it was a fun period of time, but eventually it had to change. And a part of that will always exist in crypto, because you can always create another chain, create another token, create another workaround. But largely, you have to integrate TradFi at some point in order to be part of the larger economy at scale.
Yeah, and that's been like the sort of push and pull for everything. I know like crypto was started as a very different thing, and like my earliest days in crypto were like in the 2012, 2013 era, and it was hard to even get any, much less like no one knew what it was. Those who did, it was kind of sketchy. And at some point, I think people looked to TradFi as like, this is how we know we've made it, is we get to here. And every deal is a deal with the devil to a certain extent, right? Where be careful what you wish for. And the same thing goes for freedom, of course, where, that's what I cared most deeply about. And at the same time, when you have freedom to do crazy things, crazy people will show up and exploit said freedom. And I think the early days of this space was kind of like full of, a lot of idealists, which was kind of my people, but also a lot of scammers, like a lot of like mentally unwell people too, who love to take crazy risks and get crazy rewards. And it's baked into the culture of what we do, kind of, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think. But like, for example, how many how many references in just company names and products are there to this sort of degen mindset of like how many things are called moon, like moon pay, or like Terra Luna, or lunar digital assets, or how often do you have like when Lambo, how much do you have HODL or Zodl for like the new Zcash wallet company, how many, just that like degen trader kind of vibe is kind of in the DNA now. It's kind of, I wonder if that's something that you can really extricate when part of the space becomes boring.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that hopes not, because one of the most beautiful things about this industry is the community itself, and I think the culture that it's kind of built. And it's nothing like anything else I think we have today in terms of other areas of tech. Even AI, like AI has been something that's evolved super, super rapidly. You could argue even faster than crypto in a lot of ways, and it's definitely much more mainstream and definitely a lot more in the public eye, and looked at much differently. But it doesn't have the culture that crypto has. And I think it latches itself onto crypto too, to kind of get a little bit of that culture. Again, it's something that's very unique about this space that I think makes it fun and exciting to be a part of. That there's a reason why my grandma still asks about it. There's a reason why I have friends that are very traditional white collar that still ask about it. There's why people on the street, when they hear that I do anything in this space, they're super curious. It's because they see the crazy and wild and colorful side of the space, and it's attractive. Like, why wouldn't you want to be part of something that's fun, part of something that's like highly inclusive, and something that really wants to promote, I think, healthy financial values and monetary values. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that it's very easy for that culture to also get infected with bad things. And that's where we see all these problems come into play. But again, I don't know how that'll shape up in the future. I really hope that crypto never loses that ethos and that culture fully. It's going to get smaller, unfortunately, over time. And there's a younger generation, or the younger crowd there, that's going to never know life without Bitcoin. And it's going to be very normal for them. And there's going to be a generation after that that's going to never know crypto without it being fully adopted into the mainstream. And so some of this will fade away eventually. But my hope is that it doesn't fade away completely.
Yeah, I think that it won't fade away completely, just because, and maybe this is cope on my side, but I've been involved in quite a few fringe movements over the years, and there's always something fun again about the old days of the fringe side of things. And I kind of feel like what used, like, that corner of things, the hardcore cypherpunk corner, the hardcore decentralization, privacy, all that stuff, in absolute terms, I think has grown, but it just as a percentage of this space has gone way down. So while we're getting institutions on board, et cetera, like one of the things is like the number of like explicitly privacy focused assets and privacy developers and things like that. The number's gone way up. The market capitalization of all of these together, these assets, has gone way up. The number of transactions that go through, like all the metrics you want to go on the hardcore roots stuff, has just been completely like way up. It's just that the rest of the space has grown so much more, where now there's this whole institutional side of things that wasn't there before, and that's huge. And that maybe that's a bigger part of the space than the rest. And sometimes it's hard to see like the forest from the trees. But one thing I think is what is worth it in this whole thing, because if you want something to go mainstream, it will work for everyone. And most people aren't radicals. Most people are normal people, old money, whatever you want to call them. At some point, you have to think about what is the benefit if everyone adopts this tech, even if they do it in their own way. And I kind of feel like if we build things from the ground up the right way, which is always an if, because we're still building and sometimes not in the right direction, I think that that's the major win, is if everything is built on, if like all the custodial, KYC, whatever, like TradFi stuff is built on top of networks that are decentralized, permissionless, open to the whole world, and very efficient, I think that's still a win. That it's like the top the top levels you can always start to abstract them away or change them around. But if it's just the base of the legacy system, in I guess my view, but also in the view of clearly a lot of people, is kind of like rotten. It's kind of has some serious issues of like central banks, inflation, all this other stuff, all this opaqueness. And I kind of feel like if you even if you build the same system but put it on top of something that has a good strong foundation, we do have an absolute win.
Yeah. And to defend Web3 a little bit more, like a lot of the scams and the fraud and the laundering that happens in the world still happens in fiat. It still happens in dollars. You know, you're I think we've seen a lot of things over the last couple of years transpire that's just kind of like mind blowing. The amount of fraud that runs directly through the US Treasury itself, you're just like mind boggled. Like, do we even do that in crypto? Like at that volume and at that scale every single year? Like right under government's nose, or dropping off pallets of cash to a nation that finances terror, or you know, we still have a lot of cash being laundered through cartels and different network groups for things like drugs and human trafficking, and all that's done in fiat. And they don't use crypto for a reason, because it is to a degree traceable. Like, I mean, you could keep it on chain forever and probably get away with it, but it's hard to do large financial transactions without hitting a bank account. And as soon as you do, and then you have a point of contact and a way to trace those addresses together. So it's not ideal for people to do these things in Bitcoin, especially when everything's so hyper connected now, and you can kind of figure out what exchanges these things are going to and what bank accounts they hit when they do hit. And so I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer that still kind of goes around that kind of bugs me, that this is all associated with Web3, and I don't think that's fair either. I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for us to go to Mars and set up our first colony there and have the entire colony ran by Mars token and Doge, and kind of seeing like the perfect use case play out. Like, what is a society like when everything's beautifully integrated on chain and it's built out in that kind of way? I think it'd be much different. It's hard to integrate Web3 into a system that already has a structure. That's why we're having so many fights on Capitol Hill over how to structure things, because crypto is a hybrid asset. It doesn't really fit into one single bucket. So how can you regulate it when it fits into multiple different buckets? And depending on which bucket it's in, it might not actually make sense to regulate it that way. It can, like Bitcoin can function as money, but it can also function as a store of value. You can borrow against Bitcoin. You can swap it. It's super fast compared to traditional money. Maybe not the fastest crypto out there, but it's still pretty quick. I don't know. It's just much more difficult to integrate these two things, and yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of an interesting point of like, a lot of times we think of mass adoption as like the people that are already there. And at some point, those people need to get on board. At some point, I do think that when you see enough things change, enough technology change, old systems sometimes do just like die out, and people just stop using them and they use other things. I like the idea of, you know, the proverbial Mars just running all on its own thing. I kind of think that thanks to the experimentation spirit in crypto, we're at the point where we can always do that. And we can always start to run an entirely crypto native everything. And as the tech gets more advanced, like, let's be honest, in the early days, the ability of something like Bitcoin was just send X to Y, and that's it. And there's just nothing else it did. It's very dumb in that case, and you know, which is a fantastic use case on its own, but no, not enough. Now that we have complex things like with Web3, I kind of feel like, for the most part, Web3 is non-existent at this point. Like, there are very few decentralized applications that anyone uses in the crypto world. And I'm excluding the rest of the world, because of course they don't use it. But like the average crypto person is posting stuff on X and on YouTube and things like that, and has Google Docs and cloud, like everything is Web 2. And Web3 is, they do a token post on Farcaster so they can post on X that they posted on Farcaster at ETH Denver, for example. I'm sure there was a lot of that. And there's like a couple token things, and then you just sign in to something that, you just do a, hey, look, we did a decentralized thing, and then you're back to the real world. And I kind of feel like we need to, at some point, start having these like integrated ecosystems where everything, your messages are all on chain or whatever, however you do that. Your web browsing is all there. It's all in an interconnected system that is like crypto native, and just see if it works. It might not work. I think it can work, but once we can make that work, then the hope is that grows enough to where the traditional system doesn't necessarily adopt Web3 rails. The people who use the traditional system will just exit and use a better one.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy in this space. There's wallets that are using AWS on the back end. There's a lot of things that we use as tools in this space, from X platforms like X and social platforms to Google Drive and Google Docs and Gmail. And it's like going fully decentralized in every possible way is a very difficult thing to do. And I think anyone that understands it, unless they're highly dedicated to it, they don't do it either. And there's so many different intermediary points with the internet. It makes it very difficult to even do that, even if you try. It's not impossible, but difficult. And it makes life difficult. And so I think a lot of people, even in the space, like they find different ways to incorporate a lot of centralized elements. And it's, I don't know, it's just kind of funny because I don't think you should be able to label yourself fully decentralized as like a platform or an app or a wallet if you're not. So I think it's kind of misleading.
Of course.
But it also just says a lot about the system. Like, it's hard to do that. It's very tricky.
Yeah, and there kind of has to be a progressive, I think, path to that, right? Of progressive decentralization. And like, I know, for example, Moxie Marlin Spike, the Signal Messenger founder, had some stern words on Web3 a few years ago for basically LARPing, because everything's on AWS, everyone's using Infura for stuff. Like, there's none of this is run without centralized architecture. And I mean, that's, accurate in many cases. The thing that I think it's okay to do things like that if it's a stepping stone, right? Where it's like, okay, well, technically this is all on blockchain rails. We haven't found a way to make it work yet, but it is technically. Now let's try to get rid of Infura. Now let's try to not have AWS. Now let's try to have our own indexer built into the chain so we don't have to run something else, and then just see how far ahead we can get it. And I think it's happening. I'd like to be optimistic. The dexes in DeFi, like the especially cross-chain dexes popping out, I think has been a very encouraging thing, where now you're starting to see, whether it's near intense or hyper liquid or things like that are really taking a lot of volume on chain, even though, again, Hyperliquid at least is, as far as I understand, not fully open source, so I wouldn't call it fully decentralized, right? But it's like a step in the direction of, it was all on exchanges before. Now it's not all on exchanges.
Yeah, it's we used to worry about protecting our private keys all the time, and now it's like we don't even think about it. It's so easy to just hold something on an exchange or in a wallet. And I think we should, in this industry, always be optimistic at heart and pragmatic in the mind. Like, we should always be passionate about pushing forward and where things are going to go, and that they're always going to get better in this space, and that we're going to innovate our way to success. But we also need to be pragmatically mindful of what we're doing. So you could very easily create a Trojan horse where it only, with all the massive data leaks that are happening today, it's one hack or a leak away from, if you have a major wallet using AWS and AWS goes down again and information gets leaked out, you could have millions of people exposed simply because they thought they were in Web3, but they were not in Web3. And we don't want that for the industry either. So I think there needs to be, a little bit more of a mindfulness by developers and founders to not rely on these things too much or for too long, because those bottlenecks can creep up and create real problems, and they're already creating real problems across TradFi every single year. A couple of years ago, we had like the mother of all leaks, and
Oh yeah.
late last year we had Salesforce with a massive leak that affected like Google and Facebook, and like this stuff is never ending. So it's like it's one bad hack or incident away from maybe they all get our information, or maybe they all get our private keys, or maybe they all get some kind of password access to our wallets that gives them access to sign a transaction, send it away. Like there's like terrible things that could happen if we don't mindfully and proactively figure out ways to go fully decentralized, or at least have better mitigation standards like we had before in the past, or more barriers in between. Because they're taking the easy route just to get to market and to raise funds with a VC and go into the next seed, which I can understand, the push to do that and the pressure, but I don't think that's what the space should be built on. Like we should be building solid tech and finding out ways to protect users, and I think that's something we still neglect.
Yeah, of course. And I think that it's one of those things where you take the easy route because that's what's there and that's what works. And you're not going to take the hard route until the easy one isn't easy anymore. And we have it's been some very interesting stuff happening in global geopolitics with the tech wars, where you have the EU trying to crack down on and sue X based on what users are doing. And then you have a lot of, there's a lot of especially cross-Atlantic kind of consternation over payment and data things being super centralized in the U.S. and Silicon Valley, where, so for example, with the Ukraine conflict, people in Russia have not been able to use traditional payment rails in years, like Visa, MasterCard, all that just doesn't work. And now you start to have the EU starting to think about how are we going to create our own, payment rail that competes with this and get people kind of on that so we don't rely on that. Of course, AWS and all that. It's just like the looming specter. And what I may be hoping for is when you get unstuck from your ways in that way, I wonder if that prompts you to start looking into decentralized solutions. Like it will start to become, as the world's like geopolitical situation starts to become more unstable, I guess, it starts to become riskier to have geographically dependent services and stuff. And like, what happens if the country with the data centers just cuts you off? Like, and is everyone gonna have to run their own infra in-house in their country? Or are you gonna start to use decentralized things that are kind of global?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are real things to think about. And hopefully we think about them a bit more going into the near future. Well, we talk about a lot of the problems in the space. There's still a lot of positives too. Like there's great innovation, and I think there's been a lot of great advocacy on Capitol Hill, at least in the U.S., in trying to get proper laws and regulations in play for those that want to participate in that kind of fashion and to advocate for crypto to exist. It's a huge 180 compared to where it was like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where they wanted to nearly eliminate crypto in the U.S. or at least regulate it into non-existence. That would have been a worse world. Definitely live in a better one today. Never thought we'd see CFTC and SEC like really propping up crypto and being like, yeah, we want this to thrive. Like, it's like, that wasn't the narrative.
Yeah, of
it's
course.
like you wanted to regulate us into non-existence and kill the industry. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of positives happening and a lot of good things. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of those either. And we should still celebrate those wins as a milestone and be like, okay, so what next from here? Like, how do we now operate in this friendly environment to create great gateways for people to access this industry while also protecting them and while also further decentralizing ourselves? Like, we're living in a time, almost a golden time for Web3. And I don't think people have actually realized it. Because the last decade or so, it's like Bitcoin has sucked up a lot of the limelight and a lot of the industry has been looked at in a negative way. And for the first time, it's being looked at in a positive way. And I think that's something that we should fully take advantage of to create a really solid foundation for the space. So yeah, to those out there that are watching and listening, might be a bear market, but it's also the best time possible for crypto that we've ever had. to create some amazing things that stick with us forever. So a lot of positives.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something where a lot of people I know have been sort of complaining about the US administration or whatever from a crypto perspective of saying like, man, they turned this space into a joke with the meme coins and our bags are all in the trash, like everything's dumping. Like I think people don't remember maybe how things were a few years ago. Like people like the number of people I know who, and I've been to actual like SEC court hearings against crypto companies and just seen kind of how that's gone down. It's been an ugly sight. So many companies got attacked and destroyed, so many projects. A lot of people I know, like unfortunately I have at least several people who've been on this podcast either are or have been to prison over crypto related things, whether it's, peer-to-peer trading or building privacy tech or whatever else. And it's kind of an interesting reminder, which kind of takes me to the Roman Storm thing, because Roman Storm, who is one of the Tornado Cash developers, he was charged with all kinds of nasty things, and the jury was hung on most of the charges, and now apparently the Southern District of New York is trying to retry the case. And apparently, the war in crypto is over is kind of something that Trump was sort of talking about. And unfortunately, it looks like he's going to be fighting for his freedom again. And it is a little bit of a sobering kind of reminder that maybe we're not completely out of the woods yet.
Yeah, maybe not. There's gray areas in this space that in the real world are not gray areas. They're illegal. And I think we still have to figure out how to navigate that stuff properly. Because I can see the appeal to do these things both ways and to participate and build things out both ways. And there's a lot of people that do it with no bad intent whatsoever. And I don't think people should be prosecuted for just expressing what they want to create through code. But I do think just like, when you say something like with free speech, there's still consequence to that sometimes. If you create something with code, there can still be consequence. It doesn't mean that you can't create it. So I think with this industry, there's a lot of fear that something will be coded that will be bad, whether it's on purpose or not. And I think we just have to have a better understanding of how to handle those things. If you create something where someone can potentially launder money or potentially obscure something, then you're operating in a gray area and you probably know it. But does that mean that you did something bad? Again, that's something we have to, I think, better be able to assess, especially when we create things with code in Web3 where it's out of our control. Like we're creating something that could be used for good, but could also be used for bad. Like if I create a baseball bat, the baseball bat can be used for good. It can be used to play a friendly game of baseball, but it could also be used to bludgeon someone and commit a murder. So you have to look at it. We have to figure out how to look at these things in a similar light. When something's decentralized, like how much is there an intent to do something illicit versus how much is there an intent just to create something new and expressive and fun? And then like, should we have any guardrails in there too? I don't know how to give the answer to that. I think that's something that's going to be very tough for our system to figure out how to create an answer for. And maybe there's a moral right way to look at it, but there's also there's a law in place here too, and we have to confide with the law as well. So I don't know. It's a very, very tricky thing.
Yeah, and that is kind of interesting where there were predecessors to cryptocurrency in terms of alternative currencies, and almost all of them immediately got shut down and their founders thrown in prison. And Satoshi kind of was ahead of the game by just completely removing himself and any kind of centralized levers of control. And just by existing out in the wild long enough, Bitcoin managed to set the precedent that now you can be a founder in the light and just do something completely decentralized that just runs, and you don't have to worry about going to prison. And the same way, I think that there's a lot of privacy protocols that got a lot of heat, like tumblers, mixers, and laundering. Oh my gosh, like all this stuff, sanctions evasion.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like the Samurai Wallet people and the Tornado Cash people are the people that bore most of that cost. And now you have, I don't know how many, like Near Intense has a, like the Near protocol has their own private shard that you can do all kinds of private trading on Near Intense with. You got all kinds of privacy, like successors to something like Tornado Cash, I guess, on Ethereum and Solana and things, and just thriving the privacy space. Obviously, the last quarter of last year really got a big pop. It's clear that I would say the space has sort of gotten past that. Oh, if you run privacy things, you're a criminal. But we still have, again, some of the collateral damage of the evolution of the space, and we're still trying to, sort of fight for them. And it's kind of the same thing with like the cross-chain DeFi space, where there was Uniswap had to feel so many lawsuits and things like that from the SEC and other actors, and Thorchain kind of took the brunt of the cross-chain of DPRK using their service to swap things and sort of held fast, and therefore they're still relatively alone in that they won't censor swaps like most DeFi protocols will at the protocol level. And I think just by hanging out there long enough, you kind of set the new precedent of this is permissionless, and therefore all the permissioning happens on layers above that. Like no one thinks you can reverse an Ethereum transaction anymore after the DAO hack of way back in the day. It's same thing with Bitcoin. Everyone just understands you got to catch the criminals at the other end of it. But we're still kind of at that. We're getting to that phase where we're getting that into the psyche of the world.
Yeah, and I think when you create a platform or an application or something like this, you take the brunt of the load because it is decentralized and it's very difficult to go after the people that are doing the bad things. Like take Ross Ulbricht, for example, with Silk Road. Like I'm very happy that he's out and he got pardoned, because it's one of those situations where he created a marketplace, and that marketplace was used for both good things and bad things, and he took the brunt of the law for other people doing bad things on that platform. It's not right that it should happen and work that way. But again, the law gets very murky with these kind of things, because how can they go after these people at the same time and clean things up? But it's also like there are people that use Gmail for bad things and to scam us, but no one's going and arresting the head of Google and putting him in jail. It's not his fault. I think we have to look at these things in the same way. But yeah, I know. Again, it's a very tricky thing. We'll have to see in time how these things sort out. But I don't think anyone should be getting persecuted for, just expressing their code and creating a platform. It's very weird that happens, especially when things like that happen in TradFi all the time. Again, we talked about these data leaks and these hacks, and you don't see CEOs going to jail because their system got hacked and everyone's getting compromised and millions of dollars are getting stolen from people. I don't know. We have a little bit of a hypocrisy there as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of feel like the evolution of what you're responsible for as a founder has kind of shifted, where first of all, if you build these mass platforms, right? If you have like a small bank or a small publishing house or whatever it was back in the day, you kind of are held responsible for what happens there, like completely. And then when you get to a certain scale where, the cartels are laundering billions through your bank, it's kind of like, or Google, like people are using Google accounts or Facebook accounts to do terrorism or whatever. It's kind of a turn to where you have to do something about it, even if it doesn't solve the problem entirely. And so then compliance is sort of like a perfunctory action where you're like, we deleted so many accounts and we censored these people, we're doing our best, and then it still happens, but no one cares as long as you've done your due diligence, as far as you've done something about it. and that gets you out of trouble. Then you get to, of course, the Silk Road thing, where a lot of people don't, think about it in these terms. In crypto's evolved a lot, where the Silk Road was like a censorable website, right? It was just like a open marketplace, but still is only open because the people running it were letting it be open. And when it was taken down, it was viewed as the responsibility of the people running it to, they're held responsible for what happens on it because they made a philosophical choice not to censor anything. Then you get to like decentralized protocols where anyone can post anything, and you're still sort of where, Roman Storm's sort of caught is the era of holding him responsible for what happens on a permissionless protocol as if it were permissioned. And I think the next generation after that is, if you are a front end that deals with people and you can block people, you are using censorable things, then you do have an obligation to do something. But if you're building the core protocol, you don't. And that's kind of like the, caught between the cracks of like, you just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and are still facing consequences from that. But hopefully the next developer of something like Tornado Cash won't even have to think about that this could be a possibility.
Yeah, maybe we should run some X pools to see what people kind of think about some of these different topics. It's very interesting to dive into the weeds on both, because I can look at this picture again from both angles, and there's two angles that have to be solved for at the same time. So I'd be curious what people think. I'm going to need to jump here pretty soon because I got a call I got to get to.
Literally checking my watch. I just noticed that it's shill o'clock. I don't know if you've heard that time, but it's time.
No, it's shill o'clock.
It's time for you to shill whatever you want to shill. So,
okay, gotcha.
What would you like to promote for the viewers at home? I'm going to throw up your X on the screen at least, just to have a start.
Yeah, well, I guess anyone that knows me knows that I have a podcast, and that's the basis of what I do. I've done a number of other things, so they don't matter that much. But yeah, you can check out the Block Ash podcast whenever you like. We talk to different CEOs, founders, executives, interesting people in the space, not just in Web3, but across, I like to say, emerging tech. So other areas like AI and IoT and DePIN and stuff like that. So definitely check it out if you want to hear from some of those companies and what they're building and working on. And then we're opening our physical studio location here in Las Vegas, the 6th of April. As you probably can see in my background, I got boxes, I got a mini fridge, I got things starting to pile up in my office. That's going to be opening up really soon. So just stay tuned. We'll have more information on that on all of our socials. Pretty easy to find. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, whatnot. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Easy to find. Appreciate this episode though. It's been great having this conversation and getting to dive into some of these topics. I think they're really important. I think we need to think about them a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure having you on, and all the best. And I'm hopefully going to try to stop by in person at some point, and maybe the Bitcoin conference is a good time for that. I still have to get all my travel going for that, but yeah, I'm sure I'll run into you at an actual conference. And for everyone else, thanks for watching. It's been a great one, and have a great weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.
Adam, we're here because we love you. And we're all tired of watching you get abused.
Abused? By who?
Oh, hi, I'm Visa. I charge you 29% interest, 3% foreign fees, and make you wait 3 days to see if your payment went through.
But I thought you were my friend.
Huh?
No, Dash is your friend. Instant, private, under a penny, and with Dash Spend, you walk into over 100,000 stores and pay like a boss.
All ready? Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. Feel alive, guys. This is awesome. Tastes like freedom. And I save 5% by using the app.
That's the Dash High, baby.
Let's go.
Download the mobile wallet, one tap, boom, financial sovereignty.